All right. I think we're live.
Okay.
Cool. Let me check. Um, see if anybody tuned in. I'm just checking on my app. All right. Are we live? Who just joined in? Can you say yes?
Yes.
We're live.
Are we live?
Cool.
Okay.
Looks like we are. Well, this is our first episode of the Wellness Cafe live. Hey, Elaine. Hey, Rob. And I'm just gonna fumble around a little bit to try to figure this out. This is Be Live TV for the first time. So welcome everybody. Today we have Anne Boroch. She healed herself of multiple sclerosis and has been symptom-free for 23 years. And as a nutritional consultant, naturopath, and author, educator, I'm so blessed that she has taken her time to come on the show and share with us what she learned in the past 25 years in the process of healing herself and now teaching other people around the world to do the same thing. She wrote the book, Healing Multiple Sclerosis, The Candida Cure, and the Candida Cure Cookbook. So we are excited to have you on today, Anne. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's so great. I just, I love that we're live and this is all new and exciting.
Totally. So
Yeah.
For our audience out there who doesn't know who you are, can you share a bit about your story and essentially your healing journey and what got you to where you are today?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, I was the poster child for autoimmune disease to occur. I was a sugar addict. I probably ate more sugar than 10 teenagers put together. I had 15, 16 silver amalgam fillings by the time I was a teenager. I'd rotted every tooth out. And I was type A, so a lot of stress. And, my first kind of health crisis, I had tons of antibiotics and steroids too, because I had sinus infections, colds, flus. So by the time I hit 18, I had mono, kissing disease, Epstein-Barr virus, and you're supposed to rest. And so I didn't get better. And I saw about 8 different specialists. I was on more than 20 different medications, antibiotics, steroids. And I came across Dr. William Crook, who was really the second MD to popularize Candida, which is a yeast overgrowth. And that book called The Yeast Connection fell in my lap, and I read it. And I followed the protocol of an anti-Candida diet and stayed off gluten and dairy, sugar and alcohol and corn. And I took a nystatin and antifungal, and I felt better. It took me about a year. But I didn't realize that I was such a chronic case that if you don't keep yourself in check and balance, that yeast can grow back even more virulently. And so this fungus kind of took over. And at 24, I was in a restaurant, and to you, it looked like a conscious epileptic attack. And I started to have trouble breathing, swallowing, and spasm uncontrollably. And within a couple weeks after testing, the doctor said, well, the great news is you don't have cancer. And the bad news is you have MS, and we have chemotherapy, and most likely you're going to be in a wheelchair. And I looked at my mother, and I'm like, I don't even know what this is. But I knew that I was too fragile, that if I took the chemo, I wasn't going to make it. So we left that office, and it was 4 tumultuous years of me creating a self-help program. But I went what little research was out there, because this was in the late 80s, early 90s. There really wasn't all this access in the internet, and I wasn't capable because I had basically those immune response attacks for the first 8 months. I was pretty much bedridden. I could get to the bathroom and back to the couch. But I got back on an anti-Candida program. I took minimal supplementation because I didn't know what I know now. I challenged belief systems because I really did believe the body could heal. I was 24. And I had my 15 silver amalgam fillings removed. But through all those 4 years, it was very arduous. I survived a near-death experience and a suicide attempt. So unfortunately, I cracked physiologically and psychologically. But not only did I beat MS, and I've been symptom-free 23 years, it was really a shamanic journey, and knowing that I was to help others heal. And so I've been doing that for the last 19 years.
Wow, that's an amazing story. I mean, we have the book back here. I don't know if readers can see it or not. I read that book, and I realized that this is really about the healing process is not just the body, it's also the mind as well, the mental component of just getting that diagnosis and was told that you're going to be wheelchair bound when you're 24 years old, and the effect that must have had on you at such early age.
Well, it was overwhelming. I mean, I didn't even know really how to process it, but when I found out more about the condition, I just thought, I was 24 years old, I'm just getting ready to start life. I just couldn't fathom that this was going to be the end of my road. And I'm also someone who doesn't like gray zone, so I knew it was all or nothing. You know, I didn't want to live in a body that was functioning, barely functioning. So, you know, I cried every day the first year. Trust me, it doesn't mean that I didn't feel it all. But when I had my near-death experience, which occurred when I was getting the silver amalgam fillings out, because that's an arduous process, and in hindsight, I would have waited longer, you know, it was really clear to me that I had to change my beliefs. And that's the thing. When you're dealing with autoimmune or cancer or something chronic, you know, there is no magic drug, food, supplement. It's a lifestyle change, and the key is to create an environment to remove infection and inflammation long enough, and then the body will heal. The immune system will know how to communicate properly, and that's really what I did. Was I rode that out in a very clean environment for 4 years.
Wow, yeah, and completely agree with you there. And now I just want for you to address the elephant in the room and maybe answer some questions for those out there who's listening. We got people tuning in from Michigan. Hi, Kyle. Hi, Dr. Kyle. And people coming in from Thailand as well. Hi, Marilyn.
Wow.
Hi, Ratimit. So what is Candida or candidiasis? I mean, maybe you can share a bit about that for our listeners right now.
Candida is a yeast overgrowth, and yes, males, you have it too. It's ubiquitous, so it lives everywhere in the body, and it starts single-celled, and it basically stays in balance. You know, we talk all about the microbiome these days and the balance of good to bad bacteria, but no one's talking about the microbiome, which is the fungal part of the body. And I've spent really 20 years helping people get well by addressing that. And I feel science is right on my tail that we're going to start talking about Candida and fungus more. So it stays imbalanced in the gut until you upset that environment. And it only takes one dose of antibiotics to upset that environment. But it's antibiotics, steroids, birth control, hormone replacement therapy, sugar, stress, alcohol that will wipe out the good bacteria, which allows yeast to start to overgrow. And then it's everything that turns into sugar rapidly that feeds it. So cookies, pastries, pasta, sodas, wine, which is liquid sugar, corn, and it feeds it through a lifetime where this single-celled yeast turns into this mycelial root fungal form, and it starts to burrow into the intestinal tract. And then we all know about leaky gut, how it gets more porous, and it will start to burrow and get through into the bloodstream. And the fungus really doesn't do the damage. It's the byproducts or the mycotoxins that start to destroy tissues, organs, upset cellular communication. And mild yeast overgrowth will come in the form of maybe gas bloating, IBS. It could be reflux GERD. It could be depression, anxiety. Fatigue is very common, weight gain. But when it gets into, the longer that it's not addressed, it will move into areas you're genetically weak. So if the brain's leaky, it could be brain fog, mental illness, MS. If it's, you know, the skin, it could be psoriasis, eczema. For males, it's sinusitis, prostatitis, it's toenail fungus, you know, so it can go wherever you're most vulnerable. And it really doesn't stop doing its thing until you address it. Right.
And it starts in the gut, but, you know, once you have leaky gut, it goes in the bloodstream and it can travel anywhere and affect any area of the human body. And you mentioned some of the symptoms. How would a person, let's say an audience out there, or listeners out there, identify themselves with certain symptoms and realize, you know what, maybe I ought to check for Candida?
Well, this is a challenging area still because testing is not foolproof. Yeast and parasites are very evasive, so they like to hide in tissues and organs. And there's a stool test, blood test, spit test, nasal swab, but we haven't perfected testing for Candida. So a lot of people might do a blood test or stool and come out negative. And so it's really been my clinical experience that I'm conservatively saying that 1 out of 3 people have yeast overgrowth. I really think it's more 1 out of 1 or 1 out of 2 have either mild, moderate, or yeast overgrowth, because the nature of our stress and our food supply and our lifestyle habits, everybody's microbiome is upset now. And so when you're dealing with yeast, you're also going to be tackling, because I use herbal antimicrobials, you'll be knocking out bacteria that's not great, putting viruses into dormancy and parasites. So I think it's almost a given that if you're not feeling well, it's worth doing my 90-day program that I talk about in the Candida Cure, because everybody wants to hit the reset button and age with quality. And I think we're living in that day and age where it is all about the gut. It's 70-80% of your immune system. So I'd like to say there's something definitely would tell you. In my book, there's a questionnaire, but you can even score low on that and still have yeast overgrowth. So it's really dealing with a practitioner that knows it well, and maybe just reading about it and it makes sense, and then you connect the dots and you do the program.
Definitely. And when you mentioned 90 days is not a long time.
No.
It is not, because I just want to remind everybody out there that we're stuck in this instant gratification mode in a society that promotes that. And anything longer than a 7-day challenge can be considered too long. How am I going to do that, right? Meanwhile, you've been living certain ways for 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years, and it's a blip when you put in 90 days worth of work to be able to transform your life. I think it's definitely worth it.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that's what I try to put into context. It's not that I'm there to deprive people. I say, let's just look at this as a 90-day window, 30 days increments of removing inflammation, because that's the root of everything that you're ailing with. And, when you do have 30, 40 years of history, I'd love to say that a 3-day juice fast is going to wipe it out and hit the reset button, but it doesn't work like that. And when you start to, I found that being in the trenches for so long in my program, it's not just about getting rid of yeast. I found there's some fundamental things when people walk in my office that's a given. Without a blood test, without a stool test, I can tell you that their gut's upside down, that dysbiosis, where there's an imbalance, that the blood sugar is either hypoglycemic, that's low or high, or so pre-diabetic, adrenals are tired, the liver gallbladder, which I call the oil filter, needs to be decongested, and the blood, lymph, liver, and kidneys need to be addressed. So when I come from that full-bodied approach, it's very easy to turn health around in 90 days, because I figured out what those foundational elements that need attention. And after a month, when you actually balance blood sugar and you start to knock out things such as candida and parasites, you don't have sugar or carb cravings. And the inches come off without even trying.
There's so many gems right there that I want to go back and touch into. The first one would be, I guess, how important, or I guess how critical or essential it is that you remove sugar from the diet, and how is that related to the growth of the candida?
Well, sugar is probably the most destructive chemical we ever developed. It inflames the body. It upsets the communication. It's going to feed everything from viruses to yeast. And, when we look at cancer cases, I mean, at least now Western medicine is addressing that, sugar feeds this. So it's something that that's why diabetes is, what do we have? 1 out of 3 children. And I don't know, maybe it's 1 out of 3 to adults now, because we've OD'd on it. And we just didn't get it in the form of white sugar. We did high fructose corn syrup. And, yes, we have natural sweeteners such as agave and honey, but we've even done too much. The body's been so sensitized to sugar that during my program, I like to move people to xylitol, which is a sugar alcohol, stevia, which is an herb, chicory root, and lohan. And those are substitutes we can use. And so, we are a nation addicted to salt and sugar. And the unfortunate thing is it's caused a lot of stress and throwing off imbalances. So I'm not asking people to be a monk, but when you clean out, your taste buds will change. You'll have, the energy, the clarity. And when you start to reintroduce foods that you thought you loved, you'll be very surprised at things that you're not going to enjoy anymore because they're going to be too sweet or you don't feel good. So, sugar is probably, if you had to pick one thing to remove, I'd start with sugar. Next, I would hit probably the gluten and dairy.
Right, and I assume that when you say sugar, then you start pointing at like processed food and candies and things like that. how important is cutting out foods, or does it matter? If people are just like, you know what, I cut out all the processed food, but I eat tons of like pineapple and mango and banana and whatnot, is that affected as well?
Of course, because, sugar. So what I say is during the 90-day program, I have people doing one fruit a day. The unlimited would be lemons and limes, avocado, and olives that are not in a vinegar brine. But the other fruits I allow one per day are grapefruit, green apples like Granny Smith, and the berries that are fresh, not dried, and coconut that's unsweetened, not coconut water. And then after 90 days, I'll expand and give people more variety of the other fruits, but I say keep it to once or twice a day. When people are eating 5-6 fruits a day, that's like having a candy bar and multiple. So, and even dried fruits, people are doing raw bars that are full of dates and figs. Oh my God, yeast loves that. It's like a wildfire. So, would I much rather you have a piece of fruit if you're having a bad day than M&Ms? Of course. But the reality is that still sugar, pay attention to how much you're ingesting, because even if you're not doing my program, you want to keep it to about 1 or 2 a day.
Right. And I think for those of you who's listening right now, trying to picture this, I would say go back to your biology class if you've ever taken that, and imagine a petri dish, right? And then just drop sugar into the bacteria and see what happens. They just go like wildfire. So, yeah. Is there any supplementation that you recommend for people going through your program or suffering with Candida?
I do. In my book, I recommend, I have a line that I work with, but I also recommend things that you can get off Vitacost and Amazon, some other good brands, so that you have alternatives. But I like to work with herbal antimicrobials. So, things that will have oregano oil, pau d'arco, garlic, caprylic acid. So I have a combination formula that works called Candida ABX. I also like Candida Cleanse by Rainbow Light. I like those formulas because they don't discriminate. So that way you can address more infections than just yeast. And, I think this is a really critical point, but when you start to clean out, it is essential that you have a bowel movement every day, because otherwise you're going to recirculate toxins and feel miserable. So I have so many women in particular who say, I don't go but every other day or every third day or sometimes once a week. And I said, that's not normal. They go, my doctor told me that's normal. And I said, no, it's not. You need to have at least one bowel movement a day. So make sure that you're working with that, whether it's taking in more flaxseed, ground up, water. You might need to use some magnesium citrate, triphala, and even stronger aloe products. But you don't want to start a detox program without elimination. And then the key is the gallbladder and the blood sugar, because most people aren't digesting well. So I feel the bile gets very sludgy and muddy in there, even though they don't have calcified stones. So I like to work with a product called Gallbladder ABX and decongest the gallbladder, which will then allow those toxins from the liver to dump out, and the digestion will be better. And then a product that I use, Gluco ABX, that works on basically helping improve blood sugar so that you're not having those hypoglycemic dips, better digestion, and keeping you more even, and a little bit of adrenal help so that the energy stays up. And then I work with there's not a lot in the first month, and then vitamin C and E. And I don't feel, because these products have some enzymes, I don't have to add digestive enzymes in as well, typically. And we kind of start with that baseline. And then I use red clover tea to clean out the blood, lymph, liver, and kidneys. And, or if you're allergic, I like white tea, which is unfermented green tea. So it's got a little caffeine, but the lowest, so it doesn't really aggravate and overstimulate the adrenal glands. And that's really like how you want to put the first month together, because I think it's not just about taking an antifungal. You need to support the elimination pathways. Definitely.
And to me, when I tell my patients, when you don't poop for a few days, that's you essentially absorbing toxins from your poop back into your system.
Yes, exactly.
So how about coconut oil or MCT oil? Would that be a good one?
I think that's fine. I don't have it as a part of my program, but there's so much research on coconut oil stuff. I'm not opposed to it. But what I will say is, if you haven't, particularly if you have GI issues, you're more constipated, the gallbladder might be congested, I wouldn't suggest doing 1 to 3 tablespoons of coconut oil a day. I mean, sometimes that's not a great thing. So it would depend on the person, but I think there's lots of wonderful properties, so I'm not opposed to it.
Awesome. So we kind of address the one branch or one aspect of Candida. I want to get into the second part, which is stress and emotional component of it. And what is stress doing to your intestinal environment?
Well, I feel that stress and fear are the number one body breakers. I think they trump, even if you're taking great supplementation and eating healthy, I think stress does the most damage. And I see that more than ever before because people are coming in not with just GI symptoms or whatever, they have autoimmune conditions, etc. But so many people are anxious and depressed on top of it. Just personal world stuff. I mean, we're living in a challenging time right now. And so what it does is it really puts the body into an inflammatory state and it throws off the blood sugar, which then, will feed and perpetuate infections such as yeast. So stress management is critical. And we need a little bit of it because otherwise we wouldn't get out of bed. But we're feeling so overwhelmed that, particularly where it becomes a major problem is when it affects the sleep. When you're having insomnia and you're not getting 6 to 8, 7, 8 hours of quality sleep, then it's, you start to throw off the circadian rhythm and you wind up at night and then you're exhausted in the morning and pushing through the day and then living on sugar and Red Bulls and lots of coffee. And it starts a very vicious cycle, which throws the whole system into an inflammatory state. So, I think it's so important to set the tone each day in stress management. And whether it's 5 minutes of meditation or listening to an app that's guided, because people go, oh, I can't meditate. I said, then do a guided one. Whether you take a walk, people say, well, the weather's bad. I can't walk outside. I said, you can march in place watching your favorite TV show or, for 10 minutes, It's setting the tone to put yourself on the list first. And so that you can feel that you can deal with, your life and what's going on. And so everybody has their way in which to do it. But I really do feel it's about mind, body, spirit. So it's not just popping a supplement. It's not just about eating healthy foods. It is how are you taking care of the psyche? How are you nurturing yourself? And I think that's something that more and more we need to address.
Certainly, and that's what we are all about here at the Wellness Cafe. We know the importance of physical health, but emotional health and spiritual health is critical as well because the body is just not, the sums of its part. It's more than that. And like you said, the mindfulness practice is key where you actually slow down your thoughts, right? And really be absorbed in that environment. People don't have to sit down and meditate. That sounds like something that could be too challenging for a lot of people.
Well, here's a quick trick. I'll tell you a quick trick for those that don't want to meditate. I think that in today's world, because we're so sedentary, every waking hour, get up and take 10 deep breaths and walk around for a minute. That's it. So get up from your laptop, get up from your doing, but 10 deep breaths every waking hour and walk for 1 minute, and then you can go back. And that alone will make a big difference in just your well-being because the breathing is just that. People breathe from here up because they're going so fast upstairs. And the key is nature. I'm going to tell you another quick trick, which is, and people will feel silly about this, walking barefoot on the grass, people are open to. But if you hug a tree for 30 to 60 seconds, you will feel amazing because it pulls all the stress out. And people go, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. But if you have a backyard, then go do that. But connecting with nature and, the ion exchange and just grounding, as we know, we've heard a lot about grounding now, but that's one of the things that really does help. These are very simple things and they sound trivial, but when you really do them more than once, because if you do them once, it's a novelty and you're not going to do it. But if you get into the groove of doing this stuff, it sets the tone and you feel so much better.
Certainly. So start going out there and start hugging the trees.
I'm a tree hugger. So if you see me, you're going by Los Angeles, Studio City, you'll see me hugging a tree.
Awesome. Yeah. And what kind of de-stress activities do you do?
I meditate. I chant. I hug trees. I walk. I was an avid tennis player and an injury, so hopefully I can get back on the courts. And I've always been a very conscious individual. So for me, it's about learning how to stay in my place of power, which is the now moment. I go so fast that I don't tend to dwell in the past, but I go into the future. And I find that's where anxiety happens for people. When they have fear, it's usually of the past hanging on like a stone and they're carrying it. And anxiety is more fear of the future, the what ifs, the shoulds, coulds. So I stay very mindful about the now. And that's challenging because when you move fast and your mind goes quickly, it's, that's really all you can do is experience that day. So I become conscious of what I'm thinking about. And one of the best tools, this sounds kind of silly, but the best tool in dealing with negative thought patterns is talking out loud. Because people like to push them away and pretend that those thoughts aren't there, and it becomes like the dragon by the end of the day over your head. And I said that the fastest way to dispel negative thoughts is to accept what is. So just say, all right, here I go again. I'm worried about da-da-da-da-da. I accept it. I see you, go play outside. That was then, this is now, we're moving forward. It's a very simple technique because when you actually accept what you're feeling, you give space and permission to move forward. It's the law of resistance that keeps us stuck. So when we have a feeling we don't want to accept and we're in denial, or a thought, it actually creates more suffering and agony. So if you can accept it, talk it out loud, let it go, and then go back to what you're doing. And it might sound like you have to do that a lot throughout the day, but eventually you'll tune into how much you spend focusing on negative thought patterns. The average person does 70% of thinks about negative things all day. And so, and because we're bombarded with media and et cetera, that's also fear-based. So you really have to stay mindful about what do you want to choose to think and feel each day. And you have choice in that.
Certainly, that's powerful, and I agree with you on that one. And things that I start to do in the morning is basically 30 minutes or 60 minutes after bed, no phones. Just kind of live the morning.
Yes.
Coming down and make a tea or coffee and just enjoy that process without checking my emails, without checking my texts, without checking, right? And that can be hard because that's the first thing that you grab because you know what? Our alarms are on our phone right now. So you grab the alarm to hit the snooze button or dismiss, and then, hey, while we're at it, let's check our Facebook, let's check our text, see what comes in. So
well, I think we've made it. We're addicted to all the technology, and it's wonderful, but it's also gotten us into trouble because we're looking at it 24/7, and we're not unloading. And that's why the nature, a walk, a good conversation with a friend, and also sitting in gratitude. I think it's important to recognize what you do have versus what you don't have, and put energy into that. So it's simple things, but I guess the way to sum it up is put yourself on the list first. We all have families and busy lives and schedules, but the only one ultimately that is going to take care of you is you. So put yourself on the list first.
Awesome. Can I take you back to the gut for a second?
Sure.
Let's explain the term dysbiosis because I think that's important for our listeners.
Sure. I mean, we have good and bad bacteria, and so you want more of an 80-20 ratio, or 85% good bacteria, 15% not so good. It's what happens is dysbiosis is when we start to tip the other way and we start to have more of yeast overgrowth or other bad bacteria. And this is really how this cycle happens. Let's go back to maybe when you're a child and you have strep throat, and antibiotics are necessary. It's bacterial infection, but the antibiotics can't distinguish between good and bad bacteria, so they wipe out both, which then allows the yeast to overgrow. And when you have yeast overgrowth, it becomes a banquet for viruses. And viruses then create secondary bacterial infections, which then you're back in the doctor's office for more antibiotics, and you get on this vicious cycle throughout your lifetime. So people might have reoccurring bronchitis or reoccurring UTIs, and they're wondering what is going on. And so when you have this imbalance, you want to work with someone who is versed on the gut and really clean up that mess to get back to that 80-20 ratio, because you're never going to get rid of Candida. You want to get rid of fungus, bring it back into single-celled, and get that balance of 80-20, 85-15%.
Awesome. And I just want to share with you some of my story as well. As a kid growing up, I was sick all the time, and I would visit the ENT on a monthly basis, and what they gave me was antibiotics. And of course, my parents did what they knew at the time, all right, and the doctors at the time knew to prescribe that, but that put me on that exact path, that vicious cycle. Every single month I would get sick, tonsillitis, sinusitis, or some kind of fever or cold all the time. So it was like a routine. Like
Yeah.
any month that I didn't go to the doctor's office, it was a miracle, right? Because people were just counting on me getting sick.
Yeah.
And up until I think at a certain point, my mom started to introduce me to like bee pollen and probiotics.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started to experiment with better foods, more green, more rainbowish, instead of just chicken nuggets and fries. So, and that's when my health started to transform. But I didn't know, I didn't understand it, but it was nice to not to have to visit the doctor's office all the time.
Yeah.
Awesome. So where can people find you and learn more about you?
You can, my website's probably my best way to reach out and find or grab my books, and I have lots of educational information. So it's annboroch.com. It's ANNBOROCH.com. And you can find in my social media, everything's linked there. And I just want to say, Dr. John, that's great that you were able to come into that wisdom and heal yourself, because, you know, some of the stuff we talk about today might feel a little overwhelming. And I said, you know, the best way is read like the Candida Cure. It's the short 90-day program and you'll get educated. But if you're not going to do something like that, I think what I want to leave people with is make baby steps. You know, if you just pulled sugar out for a month, you're going to feel better. If you just maybe pulled out gluten or dairy, you'll feel a shift. And I think we do live in a world where we need some minimal supplementation. So even if you're not doing a detox program, I think we need a good multivitamin and mineral that has no iron. You can do that separately if you're running anemic with chelated minerals. You need possibly extra vitamin D3. You can check your levels on that. You want your ratios about, you know, between 50 and 80. Some probiotics if you're not going to do an antifungal, because everybody's gut needs a little assistance. And I love extra vitamin C and E. And then I love green foods, super green foods. Like I like Nano Greens by Biopharma because it doesn't taste nasty. And it's got spirulina and chlorella that will work on removing heavy metals and give you some of those trace minerals that we're missing from the soil. But then fish oil for the brain heart hormones. So that's kind of the baseline. And I just want to leave people so that they have some, you know, quick steps they can integrate, is just become more conscious, not obsessed. I don't want people obsessed and feeling like they have to be a monk, but just more conscious of what you put in, because, you know, what goes in, trash in, it equates to trash out over time. And so you have choice over that, and start with simple steps.
Awesome. There's tons of information there. So we're going to have all that listed out on our show notes. So definitely check that out at thewellness.cafe or drjohnr.com. And we're going to open up for Q&A in a second. So thank you, everybody who's listening. Anybody have a question? Hi, Evelyn. Type number 1 or just type in your questions and we'll get to it in a minute. So hopefully we have some questions that we can answer for you guys. The name of the show is called The Wellness Cafe. What is your definition of wellness?
My definition of wellness is balance and wholeness of mind, body, spirit. It's about being not just healthy, but happy. And happy equates to feeling healthy. So it's doing the things that you're passionate about, because whatever you're passionate about is going to bring you more joy. And if you can't do it for a living, then find a way to do it as a hobby. So it's about really maintaining things that bring you joy, and also then nurturing and taking care of yourself by eating healthy, exercising, sleeping well, and having love and support, family and friends. You know, that's how I equate wellness.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Cool. So let's open up for Q&A. Let's see who's still live with us. If there's any questions, please type in the chat box and let us know so we can address those. I have a personal question for you. What is the exact test, and through what company do you use to test for Candida?
I don't, because as I was mentioning that, I don't feel there is an accurate test yet. I would love science to come out with something. So for me, it's really sitting down and going through a case history, and then and knowing that this is a baseline in how I get people well. It's the fundamental thing of how I work with anybody that walks in my office. I probably had in 19 years, maybe 1 or 2 people, or less than 5, that I didn't have to deal with Candida issues. But otherwise, it's a given to me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
if there's no more questions, we'll take all the questions at, you can shoot an email to the Wellness Cafe podcast at gmail.com, and we'll do another Q&A session in a few weeks.
Okay.
Well, and I want to acknowledge you for doing your work, acknowledge you for being courageous, because, I mean, essentially, at that point, I don't know if I would have reacted the way you did at 24 toward your diagnosis, and to not accept that as the fate, and realize that there's more, and believe in the body, and believe in the ability to heal itself, and go down the quest of mastery, searching for the truth, and not accept the status quo. So,
well, thank you so much. I mean, thank you. It was a pretty lonely road at that time because there wasn't all this information out, but thank you for acknowledging that. And the blessing is I was able to help so many more people because of it. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, that's it. That's in our live videos. Appreciate your time. And listeners out there, we will be doing a live Q&A again once Anne's new book is coming out. When is your launch date, or is it happening?
Probably in February, March. Don't know yet. So
okay.
I'll keep you posted.
Cool. Well, thank you so much.
All right. My pleasure.
All right, guys. Well, this will be loaded up to the audio section of the Wellness Podcast once this is maybe in a few weeks. So thanks, guys, for tuning in. Bye.